Hello, welcome back. I'm Charles Showalter. You're listening to the Union Edge Laborers Talk Radio. Thank you very much for tuning in. We appreciate you hanging out with us for the afternoon. Just off his trip across the state, Admiral Joe Sestak. Admiral, welcome back to Union Edge.
Charlie, it's great to be back. Thank you.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. You know, I got to congratulations on finishing that trip, 422 miles. How you feeling?
By the end of it, I felt as though I must have been in the best shape of my life. There were some challenging times there, Charlie. I can remember in Franklin County, as I was going over some mountains, it was like 1 o'clock in the morning and frigid, wind blowing across that top, below freezing weather. When I got into bed that night at about 3:30 a.m., I not only kept my flight jacket and sweater on underneath, or sweatshirt, and my jeans, I put on sweatpants and sweaty blanket on me, and my bones were still chilly. Was it worth it? You bet it was, to walk in Pennsylvanian shoes and really get to understand their challenges and concerns.
Absolutely. Now, Admiral, you know, you've been elected before. You were a congressman. You're running for Senate here in the state of Pennsylvania. Thank you for doing that. We appreciate it. But, you know, I got to ask you, you know, with some of the politicians that are out there, you know, they say one thing and then they do another, or there are these subtleties and these, you know, kind of sleight of hands that they can play. Oh, I voted for this, but no, I really didn't because I changed my vote. You know, I mean, how do we hold a politician's feet to the fire on this one? How do we, you know, you're running against Pat Toomey. How do we make sure he's really doing what he's saying he's doing?
Well, first, that's the reason I did the walk from the New Jersey border all the way over to the Ohio border, because I wanted to let people know in Pennsylvania how I wanted to serve them, walking in their shoes, willing to be accountable for the trust they would give me, not for what I say, but for what I do as I continue to walk in their shoes in D.C. The reason that they've lost trust in the politicians, and you brought up Senator Toomey, look, he talks recently about how honoring our veterans and how to ensure that our heroes, our veterans, are taken care of up here in Pennsylvania. And yet, when he has gone down to Washington, D.C., he voted for 12 bipartisan Veterans Administration appropriations bills, 12 of them. Every one he's voted against since he sent us to war over there in Afghanistan and Iraq. How can anyone trust someone who says he cares about us veterans, then he votes against us down there, including the Veterans Jobs Bill 2 years ago and the Veterans Health and Benefits Bill that would have taken care of the signature issue of the war, post-traumatic stress disorder. That's why people have lost trust in our politicians like Senator Toomey.
This is frustrating for me because one would think, you know, we send politicians to D.C., we send them there to do a job. We don't send them there to represent their party or their ideology. And, you know, Senator Toomey has to know that he was not elected by a majority of people in the state, just merely by a majority of people that voted that day.
I think you're right. Take a recent email that he sent out saying that he was supporting small business owners and small family-owned farmers, family-owned farms here in Pennsylvania by trying to do away with the estate tax. Yet, when you look at it right now, there are no Pennsylvania farmers, nor are there any small farmers, nor are there any small businessmen or women who are actually subject to the estate tax, because up to $11 million is absolutely not taxable. What he's talking about, and he's misleading us here in Pennsylvania, is the 3,700 wealthy heirs, those that inherit money, who have billions often, that want to pass it from generation to generation. So why he tells us that he cares about small businessmen and women and small farmer-owned family farms. In fact, his bill that he's co-sponsoring only helps the wealthiest of the wealthy. That's unfortunate because too many times money matters down in Washington, D.C., and that's why politicians lose the trust of us here in Pennsylvania.
Admiral, how do we get past these 30-second commercials? I mean, Hillary Clinton has announced she's running for president, and I swear I've seen 50 or 60 anti-Clinton commercials already.
Well, Charlie, that's why I'm walked across Pennsylvania. That's why this weekend I'll be doing 5 to 6 events. I'll be going from counties as far apart as Monroe and Clearfield, Delaware County, because at the end of the day, it is hard work to have a grassroots approach. But I think that unless a public servant is willing to get out there and have open town halls, to have people feel and touch you so they get a cut of your jib, there's no other way to overcome the misleading information of someone like Senator Toomey, who actually said, when he was asked why was the Veterans Retraining Assistance Program ended, that had trained 75,000 veterans to lose new skills so they could find work, and he told a group of veterans that he had invited into a closed meeting, I'll go down and find out why. Well, just the previous month he had voted against that bill. We get a lot of work to do to get out, and that's why efforts like yours to get the right word out, efforts like going or walking across the state that I'm trying to do will make a difference in the end, because we Pennsylvanians are pretty commonsensical, and I think we're going to see through this distrust that other politicians like Senator Toomey have foisted upon us.
Admiral, what else should we be aware of? What other things have gone on that perhaps Pat Toomey doesn't want us to know about?
Well, I can give you an example of other things that have occurred. Take, for instance, the Affordable Care Act. He just put out that he is trying to dismantle it, very proud about it. And yet what he also failed to put out is that the Affordable Care Act premiums, where you are out there in Pittsburgh on the individualized exchange, are less on average than any of the employer-based provided health care premiums. What Senator Toomey failed to put out when he said that the Affordable Care Act is costing us too much is that we actually saved Medicare from going bankrupt in 2017. If he is able to dismantle the Affordable Care Act, we will actually end up with having seniors having to have their premiums increased to where 8 million seniors, they got back $1,500 for reducing the drug cost that the Affordable Care Act did. We will now have to pay $1,500 more. And Medicare, not only will it go bankrupt in 2017, but we would also have the cost of health care go up 50% if this bill of his to dismantle the Affordable Care Act were to go out, because we cut the rise in health care by the Affordable Care Act in half. That's the type of misinformation that he has put out by disclaiming that the Affordable Care Act is a burden on Pennsylvanians, when in fact, not only does everybody have the opportunity to have health care, but it has actually reduced the cost.
Admiral, what happens to all those people in Pennsylvania that have signed up for the Affordable Care Act? And what about those 45,000 nurses, doctors, and med techs that are getting jobs in Pennsylvania because of the Affordable Care Act? What happens to all of them?
Well, it's not only them, but think about the money that they then spend, and that all of a sudden stores are having more customers come in and they expand and create more jobs. And so when you are actually having a piece of legislation that has cut the cost of health care in America from rising 6% a year to rising only 3% a year, cutting it in half, guess what? We actually are also creating jobs while we're doing that. And those jobs in the medical facilities are actually then making more jobs possible as they are consumers and spend more money. So when he says dismantle the Affordable Care Act, yes, it's true that children like my daughter who had brain cancer would, when they're off my health care plan, with a pre-existing condition, not be able, in most cases, to get a health care company to cover them because of a pre-existing condition. But more than as important as that is the job impact it would have, where we're growing jobs at less cost presently under the Affordable Care Act.
Admiral, listen, we're coming up to the end of it. I got to ask you very quickly, how do we find your website so we can find out more?
Type in joesestak.com, joesestak.com, and Joe, then it's S like Sam, ES, T, like Tom, AK.com, and on there you will find contrast papers citing what Senator Toomey has actually said and what he then voted against, as well as what I have actually voted for when I was a congressman.
Absolutely. And Joe, thank you very much for being with us today. We appreciate it. Look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thanks, Charlie. Great to be with you. Bye-bye.
I'm Charles Showalter. You're listening to the Union Edge, Labor's Talk Radio.